I'm Ron Jetter. This is part 7 of 9 in my series on grief. I hope you've watched at least the introduction or perhaps some of the others as well. Today I'd like to talk about things to say and not say, things to do and not do if someone you know is going through a grief, having lost someone to death, someone close to them, or perhaps another significant loss. Remember, it isn't just death that can bring loss. So we need to be able to acknowledge losses. We need to be able to recognize that people themselves are in grief. It's not up to us to say, your loss counts or your loss doesn't count. After all, it's only a pet. I lost a husband. It's not a game. We don't keep score. A loss is loss. Grief is grief. And if you can't empathize with someone, acknowledge that in yourself. Tell yourself, I don't really have empathy or sympathy for other people. I'm probably not the one that should be trying to reach out and comfort someone. Ask yourself, when's the time I had a significant loss, a death of someone close to me? What was helpful for me? What did I find not helpful, perhaps even offensive? Maybe that will allow you then to find that place in you that has empathy. Because empathy is the one thing that helps people who are grieving. Lack of empathy is the one thing that really does tend to shut people down from grieving. It sends the message, don't grieve around me. I don't need your grief. I think it's messy. I think it's inappropriate. And if you're one of those people that are shutting down other people's grief, it may be your grief that's been shut down. And maybe it's something that you will want to look at. Maybe you have never been given permission to grieve. Maybe you've seen it as weak, pathetic. And maybe the people who modeled how to grieve for you were strong and stoic and didn't show emotions. And maybe that's one of the reasons that some people never really grow. I believe that grief and loss can be our greatest teacher, and some people just don't feel like going to school. Now, where did I learn today's material? From you, the people. Over the years, I have picked up phrases and actions that people have found helpful and unhelpful. Let me start with a story. As I mentioned before, my next door neighbor was 8 years old. She lost a 1-year battle to leukemia. I watched her day by day. We went to the same school. I went to their house after school because my mother worked. So she and her sister were close. They were more than neighbors. They were like family. I watched kids at school make fun of her because her face was puffy. The medication for leukemia back in the 60s was not good. It didn't help her. It didn't save her. It made her throw up. And she gradually lost her life. Her last 6 months were miserable, horrible for her parents, for her sister, for all of us who knew her. After her funeral, her mother came over to our house, as she frequently did, and had a mixed drink with my parents. It was pretty much a weekend thing. The dad was estranged and lived elsewhere. My parents offered a good listening ear, and the mother of the girl that died said, the bishop of our church told me that God needed another little angel in the heavenly choir, and that's why he took my daughter, because he loved her so much. There I was, 12 years old. I don't know why I was hanging around. I just was, nowhere else to go. My first thought came out my mouth. And that's part of the way I am. I speak to think. Some people think to speak. They carefully parse their words, and then what comes out is very well thought out. For me, I'm doing the processing after the words are out there, and then I'm thinking, okay, now let me pick out what I want of those, and this is what I mean. So what came out was, after she had said God loved her daughter enough to take her daughter, I said, then I hope God hates my guts. I have since then thought about those words. And to this day, I do not regret them. And I believe they were as true then and true now as they'll ever be. That I had no place in my 12-year-old faith, and I have no place in my very adult faith, my very reflected upon faith, for a God who loves children so much he gives them a horrible, fatal, terminal disease, requiring to have an agonizing death, to be humiliated, mocked, and made fun of by other kids, only to finally surrender their life. Not a God I have a room for. If you're going to say something about your faith, well, don't be like me. Not that I said something that I regret, I don't. But it's really better to let people express their own faith and come to their own truth. It wasn't necessarily a good thing for me to confront her with that, even though it was true for me. And it took years for my parents to come around and appreciate why I said it. I was a frightened 12-year-old boy. Could God hate me enough to show his love by giving me cancer? We need to be very careful. That's the first caution then, about imposing our religious beliefs on those who grieve. Phrases like, well, you know, they're in heaven. Be comforted by that. It's better if it comes out of their mouth and we say, yeah, that's a comforting thought, rather than us saying to them what they're supposed to believe and what they're supposed to get comfort from. Some people have actually said, well, yeah, too bad they're not in heaven, or at least they'll have company where they went. This is actually cruel. It isn't up to us to judge. It isn't up to us to be in the place of God saying someone is in heaven or hell, or whether there is a heaven or hell. We are there to support what strength and what hope means for the grieving person, not to impose ours on them. So that's really the first thing. People who have lost a child have said the thing that was least helpful is, well, at least you have other children, or at least you can have more children. Each person, each human, each child has a name, a face, experiences. That child will be grieved until the parents themselves die. That child will not be replaced. The fact that there may or may not be other siblings doesn't mean that there isn't a tremendous loss, a deep, deep hole in the family and in the souls of those parents that will be there. They may learn to live with it. They won't get over it. At best, they'll get through it. Other things that the bereaved have found very unhelpful: saying, I know how you feel. Well, I know how I feel. You know how you feel. You don't know how I feel. I don't know how you feel. Again, feelings are a spontaneous inner reaction to what I'm thinking about or experiencing. And I have a unique set of feelings, and they change moment by moment, as do yours. Perhaps you can say, I know how I felt when I went through a loss. I imagine this is difficult for you. I'm here if you need someone to talk to. And I will do my best to give you a listening ear and understand. Don't judge a person's feelings. Well, you shouldn't feel like that. Don't judge a person's timeline. It's time you got over this. Snap out of it. It's been long enough. Not helpful. Things like crying won't bring him back. Shuts down grief. It says to the other person, don't grieve around me. I'm not a safe person for you. If you're not going to be a person that creates a safe space for the grieving, admit it to yourself. Send a card. Say, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry you have to go through this, and leave it at that. Don't make promises. If you are the kind of person that can be there, send a card, greet them in person, and keep sending cards 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months after the death, because they are counting time. They know events. They know months and days and years. Continuing to say to them, I recognize you're still grieving, that your world hasn't yet started, or it's not back up to full speed. Acknowledges that there's a safe place for them. One of the other things that you don't want to do is just be silent. It's so easy to say, I'm not comfortable with what to say, and I'm so afraid of saying something wrong. I'll say nothing. Saying something wrong, something that may be thought of as stupid, is not as bad as saying nothing. Because saying nothing says, I don't care about you, I care about me. If you say something stupid, you can later say, you know, I felt really stupid about what I said when I talked to you after you're grieving. I felt awkward. I didn't know what to say. That person will be gracious. I just almost guarantee it. The grieving, learn how to be gracious. Grief forces a kind of grace on us. Forces us to reevaluate life and give thanks in a whole new way. So what does help the grieving then? Again, saying, I'm here if you need someone. You might want to say, give me a call, but you might also want to say, and I know it may be hard for you. You may feel stuck. I'll give you a call. And if you don't want to answer it, that's okay. But I'm going to try, just so that you know I care. And it may be, you see a phone call coming from, you look at the ID on the call. You don't want to talk to that person, but guess what? You know that that person cared enough to reach out to you. And that's what will stay with you. It doesn't matter that you did or didn't talk. It matters that somebody made an effort to reach out to you. One of the other things that people have found helpful, encouragement to live as normal a life as possible. If there are activities that that person has enjoyed, help them enjoy it. Walking, exercising, making bread, arranging flowers, playing music, playing sports. Any of these things that would be normal. But also recognize that person may say, oh, I know we were going to play tennis today, but I just can't. Not today. Give them permission to opt out, to change their mind, to change course. One of the things that's common when someone dies is responding with food, especially if we're part of a group, a social club, a sorority, a church family, and we want to run out to the store, to the deli, and get deli trays, get a frozen lasagna, get salads. One of the things people have said is very helpful is when someone brings over a grocery bag of disposables, paper plates, napkins, forks and spoons, cups. I remember when my parents died, we had 2 events and they were just weeks apart and they were very alike, about 40 people in their backyard. Same food basically. And it was kind of an awkward thing. It was very informal. But what really helped, my aunt, my mom's youngest sister, and cousins came over and helped with stuff and brought disposable. And afterward, we didn't have to do a bunch of dishes. That was very helpful. And I hope these are helpful for you. If you have suggestions, let me know. You can email me at meetjettandsue@gmail.com. And let me know if these are helpful for you and topics you'd like me to cover in grief. See you next time when I look at grief in the Bible.